This is the new 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe, and it's Jeep going electric. Now, it's not fully electric. Instead, this is a plug-in hybrid with an electric range of around 25 miles and then a gasoline engine backup. But that's a big step for the Grand Cherokee, and today I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your car and auction it on Cars and Bids for free and pay no listing fee or commission for the seller. And we've had some great sales recently, including this Cadillac CT5V Blackwing, which sold for $116,500. This wonderful Porsche Cayman sold for $55,000, and this great C8 Corvette sold for just under $100,000. We've done great with C8s on Cars and Bids. So if you're looking to buy or sell an enthusiast car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection at carsandbids.com. So let's talk Grand Cherokee 4xe. Jeep redesigned the Grand Cherokee last year, and they're committed to expanding its appeal. And so that has meant a longer version with 3-row seating called the Grand Cherokee L, and now this, a plug-in hybrid model, the Grand Cherokee 4xe. And today, I'm going to review it. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the 4xe and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug's score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features, the new Grand Cherokee 4xe, with undoubtedly its most important component, and that would be the powertrain, because this is the first Grand Cherokee to be a plug-in hybrid, meaning that you can plug it in and charge the electric motor and it can drive on fully electric power, but then there's a gasoline engine backup that will kick in and carry you longer distances, and you can put regular gas in the car. So let's talk about the numbers. This has a turbocharged gasoline 4-cylinder that makes 270 horsepower, but obviously it also has an electric motor as well, and when the two are working in conjunction, this has an amazing 375 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. Those are huge numbers, but it's important to point out that the two are not working together for all that long. The EPA says the electric range of the Grand Cherokee 4xe is just 26 miles, meaning you go 26 miles and you fully depleted the electric motor, and then you're on gas power alone. But when the two are working together, you got big power and you got big acceleration. In fact, Jeep says the 0 to 60 for the 4xe is as low as 6 seconds, which means that this is actually quicker 0 to 60 than the Grand Cherokee powered by the 5.7-liter Hemi V8. This thing with its turbo 4-cylinder electric hybrid setup is faster, which is a pretty impressive feat, not only considering it's a turbo 4-cylinder, but also because this 4xe is about 500 pounds heavier than a V8 Grand Cherokee, but the extra power more than makes up for it. Now, one interesting thing about the electric power situation in the new Grand Cherokee is that you can't technically run solely on electric power at your choosing. What I mean by that is a lot of plug-in hybrid cars have an electric mode you can go into and then run completely on electric power until the electric power is gone and then the gas engine kicks in. Not the case here. The 4xe has an electric mode. You can see it right here. You push this button and you go into electric, and then you are mostly running on electric power. But if you floor the accelerator or want more acceleration, the gas engine will kick on even in electric mode. So if you're in electric mode and you want to stay fully electric, you got to kind of feather the throttle. You can't floor it, or else it will automatically come out of electric mode, which is an interesting thing about this car. One other interesting thing to point out under the hood is this little diagram here, which is actually a little map of Detroit. It's intended to be kind of an Easter egg, and you see 313 and a star, which is the Detroit area code. road. Jeep showing some hometown pride for Detroit in this little hidden spot on the plastic under the hood. But anyway, more to cover about the new Grand Cherokee 4xe before I get into the little quirks and features. And one interesting thing is actually a bit of a drawback with the 4xe, and that is you can't get it with 3-row seating. One of the cool things about the new Grand Cherokee is they offer a long version with 3-row seating, but that's only available with the gasoline engine. Meanwhile, another cool thing about the new Grand Cherokee is they're offering this plug-in hybrid 4xe model, but that's only available in the shorter body style with 2-row seating. So unfortunately, you have to choose whether you want the 3rd row or the plug-in hybrid, which is kind of a shame. But next, let's talk about pricing. The 4xe starts around $60,000 compared to a standard Grand Cherokee, which starts around $40,000. But the 4xe offers a lot more standard equipment compared to a regular Grand Cherokee, including 4-wheel drive. All 4xe models come with 4-wheel drive standard. You can't get it with 2-wheel drive. Now, these can get pretty expensive if you want them to. The top-end Summit Reserve model starts around $75,000, which is real luxury SUV territory, but that's how they've priced the 4xe. It is worth pointing out that you can get a federal income tax credit if you're in the United States on the Grand Cherokee 4xe, which lessens the blow of its initial cost a little bit. But here's the thing about the new Grand Cherokee. It might be pretty expensive in these top-level trims, getting into luxury SUV territory, but when you climb inside a top-trim new Grand Cherokee, you are sitting in a luxury SUV. This is a Summit model, which is very high up in the trim range, easily in the 70s, and it is incredibly nice in here. You can see beautiful flat wood on the doors stretching over to the dashboard, absolutely gorgeous. Aluminum trim basically everywhere you look, which looks fantastic. Great trim in this interior. You look on the seats, you can see beautiful perforated leather with gorgeous quilted stitching in this nice brown color that looks great. And you have that same quilted stitching on the door panel, as you can see, absolutely gorgeous, and other contrast stitching all throughout the dashboard and basically everywhere else you look. This is a seriously nice luxury SUV interior. In fact, it's nicer in here than it is in my new Land Rover Defender, which is ostensibly a luxury SUV. Well, here's a Jeep, a basic mainstream brand, and it is gorgeous in here. And there are a lot of fantastic luxury car touches in this interior. For example, the driver assist technology. This Jeep will steer for you, brake, accelerate, and it does it masterfully. This is one of the very best driver assist systems that I've used, frankly. It works great, and it's easy to use because the steering wheel is capacitive touch, meaning you can just let your hand rest on the steering wheel and it will know that you're there and you're monitoring. You don't have to like jiggle it or look at a camera. You can just rest your hand and it will steer. Although admittedly, it won't make lane changes for you, which is a bit of a drawback, but otherwise a fantastic driver assist system. Now, behind the steering wheel, you also have a fantastic system in this gauge cluster screen, which also works wonderfully. It is tremendously configurable, and you can adjust it to show basically whatever you want in the full screen of the gauge cluster. I complain often that most brands don't have enough configurability in this gauge screen. Well, this one will let you change anything and show anything that you want to prioritize, which is really useful and helpful. I love how nice it is, this gauge cluster screen. In fact, it even lets you configure the little information displays on the edges. You can see, you can adjust the right display if you want to see something a little bit different over there, and you can adjust the left display if you want to see something a little bit different over there. There's all sorts of different adjustments and configurations you can make to dial in this gauge screen exactly how you want, which frankly is what everybody should be doing with their gauge screens. It's the whole point of having a screen here. You can make it so configurable, and Jeep has taken full advantage, and that's great. And there's more great stuff to say about the screens in this vehicle. The center screen, the main infotainment touchscreen, this system is also fantastic. Now, the screen itself is a little bit smaller than you're seeing in some newer rivals, which is a little interesting, but the functionality is great. For one thing, on the home screen, you have several different things displayed at once, which I always like, and which not every automaker does. You can see the map, the music, and your phone all at once, or you can tap into each of them to bring it up to the full screen. You can also see this system is tremendously responsive. You tap it just like a smartphone. It does exactly what you want, when you want. Very easy, very intuitive, and the camera system is fantastic in here. You can see very nice, high quality, high resolution cameras that show various different angles and make it really easy. And you can also clean the cameras from your screen. Tap here, and then this little panel protruding from the front camera area will actually spray the camera camera with water to clean it off in case it gets dirty while you're out off-roading in your Jeep. Well, you can clean the camera very easily, which is kind of a nice little touch. Also worth pointing out, another thing I like about this infotainment system is they haven't integrated any of the climate controls. The climate controls are directly below. You can see physical buttons, switches, knobs for the climate controls, heated seats, cooled seats, heated steering wheel, all that stuff is below there, so you don't have to go into various menus or settings to mess with the climate controls, which is a great integration. And we're not done with the screens just yet in this Grand Cherokee, because you also have one on the passenger side. You can see this screen built into the dashboard is just for the passenger, and in fact, it only works if there's someone seated in the passenger seat. Now, this passenger screen has basically all of the functionality of the center screen, except that it really is only for the front passenger. And I have to admit, it's a little bit of a gimmick, because truthfully, a passenger could easily just reach to the center screen, it's not that much further, and do whatever they were planning. But I will say it does have some usefulness, because a passenger can like pair a Bluetooth device, for example, or put in a navigation destination without disturbing what's on the center screen. They can just do that themselves in their passenger area, and the driver can keep focusing on driving. And so in a sense, that's a pretty neat idea. But anyway, next up, yet another screen in this interior is the rear view mirror, which you can see right now is just a standard rear view mirror. But if you flip this switch on the bottom, it becomes a camera screen facing behind you. And that way, if the car is full with stuff, you're going on a road trip, or you have people sitting in the back seat, you don't have to like look through them in the mirror. Instead, you have a camera back there that's showing you everything behind you without any interior obstacles getting in the way, which frankly is a pretty cool thing. And there are far more luxury touches in this interior beyond just the high quality and all of the screens. One good example, this little button over on the door panel, press that and it turns on the massaging seats, which this vehicle offers. Very nice, very luxurious, nice massaging feel while you drive down the road. Also a nice luxury benefit of the new Grand Cherokee is air suspension, which is not only more luxurious and comfortable than standard suspension, but you can adjust the positioning and height of the vehicle. You have this little switch here in the center console, and if you're going off-roading, you can push it up and then the car will raise itself for more ground clearance. If you want to let somebody in, you can't quite climb into a tall SUV, you can lower it all the way to make it easier to step inside, which is a nice touch. Now, worth pointing out, also in the center console on the other side, you have a switch that controls your drive modes, and there are several different drive modes for the new Grand Cherokee aimed both at on and off-road driving. Also worth pointing out with this new Grand Cherokee and this high-end Summit version, you get a Macintosh sound system. You can see a couple of the speakers on the dashboard here. It's a Macintosh, which is a high-end brand name and a rare one in the auto industry. In fact, the last time Macintosh did a sound system for a car, it was the 2005 Ford GT. More than 15 years ago, I owned one of those, although mine doesn't have the Macintosh sound system, but this vehicle does. But anyway, next we move on to the back seat of the new Grand Cherokee 4xe, and I have to say, it is awesome. Not necessarily in terms of rear seat space, although in that sense it's okay. You have decent room for adults to sit back here. My knees have some room and my head has some room, and it's not cramped, but it's also not like luxurious and massive back here. It's just sort of average for a midsize SUV. Instead, it's awesome back here because of the quality and the materials, just like in front. Once again, quilted leather with that brown stitching that looks fantastic on the seats, and you also have that over on the door panel, and you can see next to the quilted leather on the door panel, this beautiful flat wood trim, just like you had up front. Really looks gorgeous even in the back seats, which is nice. Some automakers cheap out in the back, but Jeep hasn't done that back here. And you got some nice luxury amenities in back. For one thing, rear seat climate control, which isn't that uncommon, although in this vehicle you have two different zones back here, so each rear passenger can choose their own climate temperature. You also have heated rear seats, which is a nice luxury touch, and cooled rear seats, which is tremendously uncommon, but the new Grand Cherokee has it. Ventilated seats in back in this luxury version. Also worth pointing out back here is a ton of USB ports. You can see down here, USB-C and USB-A, two of each, which gives you a lot of different options for charging your devices in back, which is nice for a family vehicle. Rear seat passengers have iPads, devices, they want to charge them, and you can do that back here. Also worth pointing out, one other nice thing is an integrated rear sunshade in the rear window. This little tab, you can pull on it, pull it up, and then clip it into place, and and you have a rear sunshade so that babies or toddlers are sensitive to sunlight can be shielded a little bit from the sun. One interesting quirk back here, rear seat lighting. To turn it on, you just tap on this light, which is also a button, and then it turns on, and you tap on it a second time and turn it off. Both a light and a button in one, which is somewhat quirky. But one other point worth making about the back seat in the new Grand Cherokee, a little disappointing that there's no 3-row version, to be totally honest. I think it's great that there's now a 3-row seating Grand Cherokee, very good for families who want 3 rows, but it's just a shame you can't get that with the plug-in hybrid. It would be kind of the best of all worlds. I suspect the reason they did this is that the 3-row Grand Cherokee is large enough that it would kind of overmatch the powertrain once the electric motor is gone. 270 horsepower in a vehicle that size, Jeep may have felt it wasn't quite enough. But it is disappointing you can't get 3 rows and the plug-in hybrid, and that's just how they've done it. But anyway, next up we move on to the cargo area in the new Grand Cherokee, which is actually quite large. You might not get 3-row seating back here, but you do have a fairly substantial cargo area, as you can see. A lot of room for a lot of stuff. And the Grand Cherokee's overall design is boxier than most SUVs, so you don't have some like slanting, sloping roofline getting in the way of cargo storage in back like you do in a lot of modern crossovers and SUVs. Now, worth pointing out back here, you don't have any extra cargo space under the floor like in some vehicles, but you do have this little bag down here. You can see it's like triangular and carefully positioned next to the spare tire. That is where the charging cable goes, and it's pretty perfect. It fits into this little triangular bag in this corner of the storage area floor, and that way it's not rolling around with all your stuff back here. You have a little place for it, which is kind of nice to see. Now, one interesting drawback of this new Grand Cherokee is that you can't put down the second row seats from the cargo area. Not only is there not a little button that you push and then the seats automatically go down or come back up, they don't have that, but they don't even have a little latch that you can pull and have the seats pop down like virtually every other vehicle in this segment does. Instead, to drop the second row, you actually have to go around and pull on this lever. Seat folds right away. It's very easy to do, but it adds a little bit of annoyance if you're trying to load something large in the cargo area. You got to go around to both rear seats, both rear doors, and drop them. Virtually all rivals do that better. Now, with that said, you do have one cool Grand Cherokee touch back here, and that would be on the passenger side window in the cargo area. You have this drawing that shows like the evolution of the Grand Cherokee from the original model to the current version, sort of the Grand Cherokee from the beginning. And that's a little Easter egg drawing in the cargo area that's actually kind of cool to see. It's nice to see that nod to the original Grand Cherokee. Also worth pointing out here, one other cool thing about the new Grand Cherokee, you can see on the inside of the tailgate you have speakers mounted right here. Not really useful since there's no third row. Nobody can really hear anything out of them, except if you're like at the beach or having a party out the tailgate of your Grand Cherokee. You pop up the tailgate and you can listen to music through those speakers, which makes them pretty cool. It's good placement for Grand Cherokee tailgate parties, which is nice. But on the subject of tailgating in the back of the Grand Cherokee, let's talk real quick about towing capacity. Jeep says that the 4xe can tow up to 6,000 pounds, which is a pretty capable amount, especially considering the plug-in hybrid drivetrain for this vehicle. 6,000 pounds of towing capacity. But anyway, next up, since I'm outside the Grand Cherokee, I want to talk about design and style, and I have to say, I really like the way the new Grand Cherokee looks. I wouldn't necessarily call it beautiful or stunning or anything like that, but it's a nice, simple redesign that doesn't have like weird styling gimmicks and cuts and gouges like a lot of new cars have. This is simple, basic, but it looks good, it looks clean, it looks nice, and it looks new, like a real change compared to the outgoing Grand Cherokee, which not all automakers are doing. A lot of new cars these days have kind of evolutionary designs instead of totally new, and you can barely tell that some new models are new, but that's not the case with the Grand Cherokee. Looks new, looks clean, it's a nice, simple, basic design, and I like it a lot. Now, I want to also point out on the outside a couple of interesting 4xe specific things. One is the charge port door, which is right here in the driver's side fender. You can see it says E in blue on this, and you tap that and it pops open, and that's where you plug in the charger in order to charge the electric motor. You also have a few other kind of 4xe tricks on the outside of the car to distinguish it from a standard Grand Cherokee. For instance, the Jeep logo up front is rimmed in blue, as you can see, which is kind of the 4xe's color, that blue. You also have the same deal in back. Jeep has blue accents around it, and you have a 4xe logo on the tailgate, which really lets you know exactly what this is. Now, on the side, on the doors, you can see Grand Cherokee printed down the side, And that is also trimmed in blue, once again, to distinguish the 4xe a little bit from the standard non-blue trimmed Grand Cherokee. And so those are the quirks and features of the new Grand Cherokee 4xe. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Grand Cherokee 4xe, or as most people I know call it, the 4xe. I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's supposed to be a take on 4x4. Now it's 4xe for electric. So, driving this vehicle, I think the big question that everybody is going to have is, obviously the electric powertrain is around for a lot of the drive, but when it dies, is this 4-cylinder engine really up to the task of moving around this Grand Cherokee? A couple things. First off, with the electric powertrain and the gas engine, like I mentioned, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, which is actually quicker than the V8 powered Grand Cherokee. It does feel quick. It feels like a totally reasonable, drive it around, do whatever, get up on ramps SUV. Like, it is excellent. It's great. It's strong. No complaints at all about the power when both things are working, and when you're in sport mode, when it's like going for it. However, yeah, it is a little bit light on power when you have just the 4-cylinder going and you're just on pure engine power alone with no electric. But I do want to point out this car has regen braking like all these electric vehicles do, meaning that you charge the electric motor as you go. So I got in the car today and it said 12 miles of electric range. I've driven the car 20 miles or so and it still says 5 miles of electric range. That electric motor doesn't fully deplete unless you're like kind of on electric only power and you use it up basically, and even then it can regen a little bit in the car. Basically, for most people driving most of the time, the electric motor is there kind of as an assist for various different types of driving, and it vastly extends your fuel economy and it extends your range, but you're rarely going to be like on full electric to the point where you fully deplete the electric motor, if that makes sense. Now, I did read a review of this 4xe wherein there was some complaints about the driveline. When it switches between gas and electric power, you really feel it and it's bad. I agree that you can feel it, but I don't really think it's all that bad. I think people are willing to put up with a little bit of that discomfort in order to have sort of the cool benefit of this 4xe plug-in hybrid situation. And as a result of that, I don't think that most people are going to really complain if they even notice it at all. It isn't as smooth as just cruising around in an electric car or even in a gas-powered car, but it's fine. It does what it needs to do. It's like good enough. And I don't really think it's like a big distraction or problem as you drive the car. I think it works and everything's good. Now, beyond the powertrain situation, which is excellent, frankly, the new Grand Cherokee is a great vehicle, a fantastic vehicle. I'm blown away. I get into these high-end trim level models and I'm blown away by the quality of it. The materials and interior are just fantastic. You don't really have a lot of this cheap, crappy plastic. The turn signal and wiper stalks are cheap. The engine start-stop button is cheap. Other than that, it's all just nice stuff in here. Nice stitching, nice leather, nice wood, nice aluminum, a lot of screens that are very responsive. Like, this is a luxury vehicle. And that's always kind of been true. Grand Cherokee, you always had some buyers who were buying like instead of a luxury brand because they like the Jeep brand name. They think it's cool and makes them feel off-roady. And now Jeep has finally truly answered those people. And even after years of doing relatively nice Grand Cherokees and relatively nice ones, they've now done like a seriously nice one that I think directly competes with true luxury SUVs. And it's excellent in here. It's really, really nice. And there's other nice benefits to the new Grand Cherokee also. You get the sort of boxier styling, which is lost in a lot of modern crossovers, a lot of swoopy crossovers, a lot of like slanting backs. That's not the case here. This vehicle has like a nice boxy shape with good outward visibility, big windows in back, which a lot of people like. And you have a good high seating position. It feels kind of like an SUV, but it's so nice in here. And you also have the benefit of the, electric drivetrain. And so there's a lot of nice things. Really, it's hard to say that the newest Grand Cherokee is anything other than one of the very best midsize SUVs on the market. It just simply is. There are so many great benefits of the new Grand Cherokee. It's interesting, more and more midsize SUVs are coming to compete with this vehicle, and it's got to stay better and better in order to stay ahead of them and keep its market share, and Jeep's doing that. And I think that this new Grand Cherokee is unquestionably the best version yet, and this 4xe model helps it cement that status, kind of giving it this new plug-in hybrid powertrain that I think is going to really resonate with the type of for people who buy this car. And so that's the new 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe. There's a lot to like here. The new Grand Cherokee is excellent, and it's great that Jeep has expanded the lineup with the long wheelbase 3-row seating version, the Grand Cherokee L, and now this, the plug-in hybrid 4xe. Full electric would be nice for the Grand Cherokee, but this will certainly do for now. And now it's time to give the Grand Cherokee 4xe a Doug's score. And the Doug's score is here, 54 out of 100, which places the Grand Cherokee 4xe here against rivals. It beats out pretty much all mid-size SUV rivals like the Kia Telluride, Hyundai Palisade, and Nissan Pathfinder, and deservedly so. The 4xe is a great combination of luxurious and efficient, more than most. The 4xe loses out to the new Ford Explorer ST, which specifically emphasized performance, though, and it also loses to the new Grand Cherokee L, which is more practical and a better value. With that said, there's a lot to love about the 4xe. The new Grand Cherokee is the best Grand Cherokee ever, and the 4xe helps to cement that fact.